y'all, I'm Richardson with Relevate, and we're bringing you another episode of our amazing podcast telling you about what you need to know when you move here to North Carolina. So North Carolina does have some interesting things and nuances to it, so definitely check out our other episodes that are North Carolina specific. But today I'm talking to you about something that I get asked a lot, and that is, why is my builder not willing to finance this project, meaning they're carrying the loan from start to finish, when I want to customize my new house? So when we say customize, we're talking about a tried and true custom build home where you're designing all the different spaces, how it's going to look, and just the overall layout and location of the home. So first of all, there are some really big factors to consider. Location is one of them. Where the home is going to be, or where you want the home to be, is really going to impact a builder's ability to carry that potential loan for you. If you want to be in an isolated location, no HOA, no covenants, meaning it's kind of a one-off project, it depends on the size of the home and the price point as to whether or not it's going to be worth it to them. Remember, it's a business and they're kind of evaluating the risk and the reward when they're making these decisions. A lot of times, even smaller neighborhoods, even if it's like 10 houses or fewer, it's a lot easier to resell a product that didn't close than it is in these one-off and isolated locales. It's a much smaller buyer pool that wants to live in that type of area. Also, you got to think about the type of materials being used. So builders do have to stick to their craft, like they're going to own what they're doing. But if you want, let's say, Carrara marble versus quartz countertops, there's a huge value difference there. All that stuff starts to add up. And sometimes it's really difficult as a non-builder person or a client to understand what that markup and differentiation can be. The other thing to think about when it comes to materials is a lot of times builders are taking on the risk that the materials change in how much they cost. So when you go under contract, materials might cost, let's say, $10, but by the time you finish the product, because of supply chain, demand, access, there's a lot of different reasons, it might actually change to where it's now $100 per product. So you have to think about the fact that they have to make money on what they're doing, as well as taking ownership over some of those changes. Another one is thinking about how many changes to a standard plan you're planning to make. So if it's kind of like a normal CAD file, and CAD file, guys, is the layout of the house, right? There's some really cool websites you can check out to kind of see what I'm talking about. But there are certain permitted plans that they've done over and over again. It's an easy build. But then when you start saying, okay, I want to add on a screened-in porch. Okay, that's just a little bit of framing, some extra material, no big deal. May or may not affect roof line, especially if you already had a covered patio. But when you start adding rooms or even layers to the house, or God forbid you ask for a basement here in this granite-ridden society that we live in North Carolina, you're adding a lot of cost value that, again, the builder has to decide, is this going to be worth it? Does this layout make sense to future clients should you not be able to close? And then the last thing is, how much cash are you willing to put down on the project? One of the big, I think, misnomers about building your own home is that a spec home is only going to require that small builder's deposit, whereas a custom build, you may have a lot that comes out throughout the entire process. Like if you make any design changes that are out of contract, that's liquidated costs, or potentially having to buy the land outright if you couldn't get a land loan. So it comes from being just maybe like a $3,000 down payment for a builder's deposit to hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket just to get the project off the floor. So when you build a tried and true custom home, you're kind of committing to a few different things. First of all, you're committing to designing everything within the plan. Engineered plans cost a lot of money. I've seen some of my custom guys ask for a $5,000 deposit just to have the plans engineered, because you're actually having to go to a structural engineer who's looking at how much steel needs to be involved, how much lumber, like down to the inch of where every wall is, to look at load bearing stuff. So keep in mind, that's a cost. It's a time and resources situation. The other one is designing all the aesthetics, which some people love, some people hate. If you have no taste in style when it comes to home stuff, like myself, for example, it could be overwhelming to make all those decisions. So you lean on the designer that works with the custom builder. Well, their hours also cost. And then when you're making those choices, and maybe you want nicer fixtures than what's allotted in your plan, that's extra cost out of pocket that you're going to have to pay for. Another one is just how you're financing the project. So a big one is using a CP loan, a construction to permanent loan. Sometimes you can have one closing, sometimes two. Also, are you buying the land outright? Is the builder going to carry the loan and do it like a pre-sale kind of opportunity? There's a lot of variations on this. So it's really important that, number one, you talk to a lender that is familiar with building a home from scratch. There are some great lenders right now that can offer anywhere from a 3 to a 5 year build time on a CP loan. So if you need any of those suggestions, feel free to shoot us a message. But just keep in mind too, land loans are not super common just by themselves, simply because that building and that structure is where the value add for a lot of these banks and mortgage lenders, that's where it comes from, where they're going to make all their money. Having a $50,000 land loan really doesn't make them a lot in the long term. So another thing to consider too is builders who do pre-sales and they're actually carrying that construction loan for the duration of the build. That interest rate that they're carrying is probably significantly higher than the one that you would carry on a CP loan. They also are only allowed so many streams of that income, right? So that that process where they're getting money from the bank. So at some point, their portfolio can also get maxed out and they may not be able to take on a new project. So thinking about this, if something needs to be customized that's personal to you, a builder is typically going to go back to that risk assessment and decide, are you personalizing it so much that they're not going to be able to resell this house to the 80% buyer pool, which means that larger buyer pool that's looking for kind of your generic home with all the modern color schemes and a very usable floor plan with not those intentional rooms that are very specific to maybe you and your family's usage. And the last thing is, builders have a reputation to uphold. So they have a style or a design level or some kind of craftsmanship that they kind of hold to. There's even locations that builders really want to stick to because they want to be known in that area. So sometimes we might ask them to take on a project that really doesn't fit that overall portfolio that they have. So keeping in mind all of those things, the deposits are just really important. Builders are going to require a substantial amount of money if they are customizing a project for you and your family. Something else, just a pro tip here, if you see what a builder bought a piece of land for, I highly doubt you're going to get it for the same price. Number one, the land has probably increased in value. In addition to that, if there were any structures on site like a teardown house, those can cost $50,000 to $80,000 to remove, especially if there's materials inside like lead-based paint, asbestos, or anything else that needs to be hauled off in kind of like a biohazard type way. So just keep that in mind that, again, it boils down to business factors, and while they want to be economical and they want to work with you, there are some financial restraints and some constraints in what they're willing to do. If you have any specific questions about building your dream home from scratch and you have a budget in mind, feel free to reach out. We have some great lending partners we can recommend, or even just some procedural like process that we can throw at you, and maybe even some local custom builders that we can introduce you to that might take your vision and bring it to life. So I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate, and we'll see you next time.